This episode of Adventures in Alchemy is brought to you by the Moon and Magic Planner, 13 Moons of 2020. Plan on magic for 2020. Magic just doesn't happen. You have to plan on it. And this planner has plenty of ideas and spaces for creating magic. It celebrates the moons instead of the months. It follows the cycles of nature. It has pages to share your word of the year, your intentions, an oracle reading for the year. It also has spaces for your incantations, full and new moon rituals, working with waxing and waning moon energy, planner pages to script out your best year, and weekly pages that include the oracle of the week, along with magical notes, spells, and recipes that you may be working with, or experiments, right? And also you can track all of your magical habits here because these habits really build up our own connection to magic in the world. And it's just brimming with magical energy for you to have the most magical 2020 yet. How many times did I say magical? Too many. But go to the show notes and check out the link, or just go to www.dailyalchemy.com and scroll down to about the middle of the page and you'll find a big button that'll take you right there where you can see the brand new gorgeous cover for 2020. Hello and welcome to another episode of Adventures in Alchemy. I'm Michelle Martin Dobbins, the creator of dailyalchemy.com and the Moon and Magic Planner 13 Moons of 2020. Welcome. Today we're going to talk about Ancestor alchemy and some tales and tips, weird and wonderful. I'm from West Virginia, so it's kind of like wild and wonderful, but weird and wonderful. Yes, my ancestors are interesting peeps, and I can assure you that yours are as well. So if you haven't ever dived in and worked with your ancestors, I hope I'm going to inspire you a little bit to look at that. And just to start off, you don't have to know who your ancestors are. You can be in situations where you're adopted, and you can be in situations where there's slavery in your history or whatnot that makes you unaware of like exactly who your ancestors are and exactly who and where you came from. And that's okay. You can still do ancestor work. And in some ways, I think it's even more important when you don't have that knowing of it. But that's just a personal opinion that I'm throwing out there. I wanted to share kind of some stories. When I started this podcast several years ago, it was a lot of true stories. And so this one is going to be some of my true stories. I love how like synchronicities and just crazy stuff pops up in life when you play with magic. So, and for me, ancestors are one of the things that just, I get a lot of guidance and a lot of help from ancestors, whether I know it or not, I think. And if you're in the Northern Hemisphere and you're listening to this when it's put up, and it's October, this is a time when the veil is thinner, contact with the other side is easier. That's why we have All Hallows Eve. That's why we have the Mexican culture has the Day of the Dead. It's just a time where it's easier, but that doesn't mean that you can't do it any time of the year and all times of the year. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about how I got started working with ancestors. My grandmother was always big into genealogy, and I've always been interested in it as well, but I'm lazy. That's just truthfulness there. My grandmother did a lot of the work. Now I am so blessed to have a dear cousin who does a ton of ancestor work on Ancestry.com. And I'm doubly blessed because she's married to my husband's brother. Yeah, we're from West Virginia. That's kind of part of this story as we go along. But so I get his family lineage, and so both sides of my kids' family lineage from the work that she does. So I can't tell you how thankful I am for her to have that. It is super nice to have it, but you don't need it for this work. So I just wanted to kind of give an overview of how I really started working with my ancestors and how that's evolved for me, to give you some ideas of what you might want to do, or just, how you can start. So for me, there's always an interest, and there's genealogy and looking at that. But like, as far as really, and I always talk to one of my grandmothers. And I found out later, as doing ancestor work, that she was kind of a busybody in life. She was like in everybody's business, and she continued to be in everybody's business and the after realms. And I had like people come to me and it's like, you have this spirit here, and she means well, but she is not helping you right now because she hasn't been elevated. And that's something that we'll talk about as we go along in here. But I talked to her my whole life, because she died when I was 3, and I had like this postcard that she had sent and wrote addressed to baby girl. And like, I just had this connection with her. So I guess I've always had kind of an ancestral connection, but I really didn't know what to do with it. And it's very sad here in like the Western world that we've kind of lost touch, most of us, with the veneration and the connection with our ancestors. Just even the people who've died recently in our family, they're our ancestors too, so most of us know at least a few generations back. So I think it really hurts the soul of our population. And I do think that, doing ancestor work could be very healing for our communities and then for our nations, because it's important to remember that there were those who came before us to make a path for us. And now that we're making a path for the next generation, and we're going to be ancestors, and we don't want to lose sight of that as we go through life. So for me, I went to Mexico in October of 2014. And I think that was what sparked in me. Like, I saw some of the Day of the Dead preparations and stuff. I wasn't actually there for the Day of the Dead, but I saw, and I talked to people there, and I had some really good conversations with some people, and like really then started doing even more research on like why that culture does that. And it was just so beautiful that, I just went home and culturally appropriated. And I'm sorry, but that was my start. And so I am ever thankful for that trip. And that year, my family and I, we went home, we did like the sugar skulls and we set up the altar, and we did everything that we saw was being done in the Mexican culture. And it was a good start. And then I went, it's really nice that we're doing our ancestors. And, I feel like pretty much every culture, we do the same kind of things differently. But in the West, sometimes we want to reach out and copy other cultures because our culture has lost things that some other cultures haven't. So it just felt really good for me to do that. But it also didn't feel really good for me to like do the sugar skulls and all those kinds of things, because that wasn't what my own heritage would have done. And not that there's anything necessarily wrong. Just, like, I'm a big believer in, I think it's Starhawk who wrote definition of like cultural appropriation is like taking the gifts from the ancestors without, this is totally ad lib here, showing respect for the descendants of those ancestors. Like, don't go stealing somebody else's spiritual tradition and claiming it as your own and just trampling all over the descendants who truly own it. Like, if you want to work with something that's outside your cultural realm, be respectful, note that you are an outsider, but you see the beauty and the value of this, and you're not there to steal it, but you would just, want to learn from it. So that little aside on, I decided the next year that I was still going to set up an ancestor altar. And I tried to kind of research more Western traditions on it. But we have, from 2014 on, we always had an ancestor altar during the whole month of October into usually like the end of the first week of November that we set up, and we put out offerings of ancestors that we knew, their favorite foods, and we would spend time at that altar talking with them, meditating. We kind of set our whole dining room up with that. And then there came a point, like about 2 years ago, that we decided, my oldest daughter and I, that we really wanted to have the ancestor altar be part of our lives every day, and that we wanted to really connect with our ancestors more deeply on a daily basis and make them part of our life, as a lot of other cultures have in the past and currently do. So now we have one that is slowly growing, and it's always up. And for me, what I do with that altar at this point in time is I have a day every Tuesday. Tuesdays in my house are St. Martha Day and Ancestor Day, and it's the day when I work from home. So before I start working, I spend usually a good hour doing offerings. I'm currently working with St. Martha, and so I will sit with her and listen to her music and talk to her and put out offerings for her and her candle. And then I will go to our ancestral altar upstairs, light the candles, put up new fresh offerings, always make sure the flowers are fresh and nice on Tuesdays. That's one of the things that I like to do. It's not something you have to do, but I like to keep flowers on the altars that are fresh as much as possible. And then I just sit and I know that a lot of my ancestors like coffee. And so that's one of the things that I always put, like fresh water, fresh coffee, and usually some other kind of food and or plant matter. A lot of times I put clovers out, but I'll put coffee, cakes, all these things that I'm not eating anymore because I'm off sugar for a whole month now, but I still buy them for my ancestors and my kids. But I will put things up there that I know they like. There's always a cup of coffee, and then I make myself either a cup of coffee or a cup of tea, and I just sit and I talk to them and I commune with them. And then I usually kind of end it by doing a meditative journey and like a journaling, because I'm still working on doing some healing work on my ancestral lines. And in a way, I think that's kind of a continuation, but that's the main thing that I do. Over time, I've established one of my ancestors that I connect with pretty much on a daily basis. And dude, I hear her walking through the house. It's so weird. I can be here by myself and I can hear her walking upstairs, and I just know it's her. And I mean, it's not scary. It's all very cool. But yeah, that has been something that has evolved over the past 6 months to a year. And she's actually not the one that I used to talk to so much, but she's her mother. So ancestor work has just, whenever I started doing this small, I had some really cool stuff happen to me. And one of the really amazing things that happened was I came to know about a book. I think I may have heard Daniel Foor on Gordon White's Rune Soup podcast. And so I was really intrigued by that. So I bought the book, and it talks about ancestral medicine, ancestral healing. And so I have done other ancestral medicine and ancestral healing, and I've done elevations. And I'm going to put a link in the show notes, because the two people that I love the most for ancestral healing work, one is Kai Armand. So I'll put a link in my show notes to his spirit elevation blog post. I've done this for ancestors. My daughter's done this for ancestors. And it's a great thing to do, especially if you have one certain ancestor that you want to work with, or if you kind of get the idea, even if you don't know their name, that there's an ancestor that has issues that really need to be healed, because their vibration and their level of healing affects ours and vice versa. We still affect each other. So I'm going to put that link. But Daniel, he works with a different way. Instead of working with each ancestor separately, he works with healing the lines, like your mother's mothers your mother's father's father's fathers, your father's mother's mother's mothers, and your father's 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 fathers. So there's 4 lines. And I have been doing that work, and I've healed 2 of my lines. So I'm still working, and that's part of the work that I do on Tuesdays Tuesdays are ancestor days. I mean, I do other work, but I put that first. Because if I didn't, it wouldn't happen. So I put these, like Tuesdays, I love Tuesdays, because I know on Tuesdays come hell or high water, or, if I'm traveling, I won't do as much, but I will still find a way to spend some time. Yes, for the ancestors and some of my other spiritual work. Tuesdays and Fridays are like my biggest days, and Tuesday is my primary day. So once I started doing that, and I was reading Daniel's book, Ancestral Medicine, and I realized he gave workshops, and I was like, wow, that would just be really cool to go to this workshop. And for some reason, I just got like this, like, don't go by yourself. And I was like, don't go by myself. So I was like, okay, I asked my daughter, my 19-year-old, who's into a lot of this kind of stuff. She's like, nah, and she already had plans to go to Virtus Geni. So I understood. And even though I wanted to go to that, I just like felt this strong pull that my summer spiritual work was going to be this Ancestor workshop that was through Daniel Foor. And so I was like, well, okay. I asked my husband. He was like, no. But he's like, why don't you ask your cousin? And I was like, yeah. So my cousin, who did all this massive genealogy work, I asked her, and we sorted it out. And it was like, literally, she has 3 children and multiple pets like me. We just have a lot of things going on in life. And even in the summer, she's doing camps. And it was like a minor freaking miracle that we both could do it. It was like I think it was a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, if I remember correctly. Anyway, that we could both be available for this, and I could take her there that was going to be her birthday present. So I was so freaking excited. And I went to go buy the tickets. Dun, dun, dun. And guess what? Sold out. And I was like, okay. So I just went, no. That's not how this is going down. So I just waited a few days and kind of sat with it, went talked to my ancestors, and I just got like, no, you guys are going. So I didn't even tell her that I wasn't able to get tickets. And then, so I go back, and 2 days later, get on the website, and I'm like, I'm just going to email them and just say, hey, do you have a waiting list? Because I just know I'm supposed to go. But as I go to do that, I just decide to click on it once, and there are like 2 spots open. I don't know what happened, but yeah, we were meant to go to this. And so it was just an amazing, amazing, amazing time with her and with these people and everybody spending this weekend doing ancestral work in a workshop. Just super powerful. And I'll put the links to like the 2 ladies who ran it. They were just fabulous. And even everybody that helped them was fabulous. And of course, names are going out of my brain right now, but it was such a good, sacred ritual space that was just amazing. And then in the evenings, my cousin and I would go to the cemetery and we both love being in cemeteries and love the energy. And so there was this huge cemetery in the city that we did this in. And so she would go one way and I would go the other, and then we would meet up later on. But so it was an amazing time, and we just did so much work on our ancestors, and like so many things have shifted for me in how I relate to family and things since this happened. Now, one thing that did kind of like send me for a loop, my mother is the sweetest lady in the world, and she takes care of everyone, and she is never sick. I mean, like, I just, she might get a cold or something. She's just like, she works through everything. And so when I went to this, I'm trying to remember, I think it was right before I went. I had already bought the tickets. I went up there to see her, and yeah, when I came home, I was going like straight to this. She got really sick. She got food poisoning, and then but she wouldn't get better. And I even ended up my dad took her to the hospital. I took her to the hospital. She spent a lot of time. It was just kind of like this weird mystery illness. They couldn't figure out like why she wouldn't get better. And she was just down. And so when I went to this thing, I started working on her mother's line. And, I came back and all these other really cool things were happening, but my mom was still really sick. And by really cool, some of them were fall apart to fall back together, but that's neither here nor there. But I worked with, I went and stayed with my mom for a little bit. And I'm still working with this line because sometimes it takes a while to heal a line. It's not just like a one session thing. It's definitely never just a one session thing. And if you're interested in it, it's a great practice. So I'm going to put a link to his book and to like his website and stuff. All this stuff is fabulous. But anyway, slowly over time, my mom started getting better. She's still gaining strength back. But a few weeks ago, I finished healing that line. And that day I spoke to her, and that was the first day that she had gotten enough strength back to drive herself to the grocery store and pick up a few things. So it was like, not like I was causing it, but it was almost like the healing of that line was going through her body. It's just really strange. It did kind of make me a little bit, actually, I say it makes me a little nervous now, because at the time I did not click those two things together at all until that day that I was like, oh my gosh, this line that I've been working on, it's finally done. And my mom is better. And, it was her mom's mom. So that was just a really weird and wonderful kind of thing. I mean, it definitely wasn't good that she got sick, but I can't explain how I felt like that, like the healing processed some of that ancestral wounds. Like, she did some of the work, and she doesn't know anything about this, and this is not in her wheelhouse, but I still feel like she took it on subconsciously, consciously, whatnot. So that was one of the weird and wonderful things. And then, gosh, just a week or two ago, my cousin and I, we've both kind of really gotten more interested in the genealogy since working with all of this. And she sent me this thing, and she found, and we knew it was really interesting because her family's line, is pretty similar. Our mothers are sisters, and then we're married to brothers, so they have the same line. And there's a lot of overlap in where people are in the world at the same points in time. But she found a person from the 1600s, a man who had a son and a daughter, a man and a woman who had a son and a daughter, and they kind of went off their own separate ways. And it's really strange in a way, because I don't know what the health issues were, but, in the 1600s, to only have 2 children, and they were like separated by 12 years in between them. So that's kind of odd in itself. But one of them became the great-great-great-grandfather to my husband, to his father, and thus to him. And then the daughter became the great-grandmother of my mother, and thus to me. So we found out that if everybody's father and mother was who it says and were on the birth certificates back then, that my husband and I are 9th cousins. And my children are just like so icked out by that, especially the fact that they're already like with their best cousins. My husband's brother's children are their first cousins and second cousins because their dads are brothers and their moms are cousins. So as I said, West Virginia, you got to love it. But it was very interesting to me that, because when I met my husband, I had such a familiarity with him. And it's just, I don't know, it's interesting. It almost makes me question, how much free will do we have? How, these people who are put on our paths. And I know a lot of other people, and I'm sure you guys some of you have stories like that too, where you just end up in the path of someone. Like, I grew up in West Virginia. My husband grew up in Florida. We met each other in Georgia. What are the odds that we would be very distantly related? I don't know. Maybe everybody's that related, but just that she can actually find it through the lines is kind of interesting. But you may not find out that you're married to your cousin. But if you do ancestor work, you will have really cool experiences. And, I've heard it said before, and I think maybe it was on the Queer Witch podcast with I know it was when Kai was on there, and I can't remember if he's the one who said it. I think it may have been the interviewer, and I can't remember her name right off the bat, but is that there are so many people working with saints and angels and maybe even demons, but there's not that many people doing ancestor work. And if you're working with your ancestors, unless you've come from a family line that does that, and even if you do, there's not going to be a lot of people working with them. So it's not that like working with Mother Mary, I think is what the example she gave, is not going to be helpful to you. But your own ancestors, they've got skin in the game. They want to be helpful to you. They want to help you heal because it helps them heal. It's a beautiful symbiotic relationship. And when you play with it, even if you don't know the names and the places, and if you don't know the names and the places, I really encourage you to do Daniel Foor's work, because it will help you to heal these lines of your family that you may not know. And he has techniques for folding in people who are like family and adoptive people and all that stuff. So it doesn't matter what your family line is like. This stuff is it's life-changing on an energetic level. And when you change the energetic level, everything else starts changing. It changes how you interact with the people in your life, and especially your family. And it doesn't necessarily happen overnight, but you start noticing that things are different, and usually in a good way. So ancestral work is just, like, for me, I think it's been the most, I don't know, so many things have been really cool for me, but the ancestral work is just, it has made me grow as a person, and it's made me grow as a magical being, if you will, as far as like the synchronicities and the connection, not just to my ancestors, but to the people around me, to the lands around me. Somehow all of that can be and is activated. And it can be activated by just a simple glass of water put out for your ancestors, even if you don't know who they are. So I highly recommend that. And I also highly recommend doing some type of healing work, because look at the world around you now, and you know enough to know that most of our ancestors did not necessarily die in an elevated state. Like, things went wrong in the family line, in almost every family line. You know, there's pain, there's abuse, there's addiction, there's, you know, all kinds of things. And before you necessarily invite in ancestors to work with you, if you have one specific one, go do that spirit elevation that Chiron Armand teaches. And if you just really want to work with ancestors, you know, do the ancestral medicine that Daniel Foor teaches and heal it up, because you don't want to necessarily, I think that too was like a real big turning point for me. Like, this has been something that has really evolved over the years, really deeply since 2014. But what really made the difference for me was not just thinking that my ancestors could help me, but realizing that I could help them, and then they could help me even more. So I invite you to explore that. Your experiment for this podcast episode is to set up a simple ancestor altar. If you don't have pictures, you don't necessarily have to put pictures. And I know that a lot of people don't recommend putting the pictures on an altar until the healing work has been done, either for that particular ancestor or that particular line. And then just, you know, connect with your ancestors in whatever way feels best to you. And if you haven't done any healing work, I would recommend that you just kind of be like, sit down and say, I want to speak to the most healed person in my ancestral history. I want to connect with that energy, whether or not you know who they are. So, yeah. And I still think that it's cool to leave out things that relatives liked, but definitely do that healing process, because that that really seems to shape. I think having respect and veneration for those who've gone before is important, but before you start really, really diving in to have them be a part of your daily life, do the healing work. Do the healing. Or don't, and see what happens, right? It's all okay, because I've definitely had experiences with that and come out on the other side. As I said, I had that one ancestor who spent a lot of time with me, and in some ways it was good, and in some ways they're like, I found out, hey, she's eating you. They're eating your energy, and so you definitely want to get that right. But like I said, it was definitely not like an end all. I'm still here and I'm on the other side of that, and now that ancestral healing work has been done, it's all Gucci, as my kids would say. So go out there and connect with your ancestors. Let me know how it goes. You can hit me up. Go to dailyalchemy.com. From there, at the bottom of the page, you'll find the links to send me emails, or go to any of the social medias. And I will put links in the show notes for the spiritual elevation, for ancestral medicine. And I do think I may have a page with some of my favorite ancestor stuff on my Amazon storefront for my Amazon influencer account. So I'll put a link to that as well. And as always, there is also the order form for the Moon and Magic Planner. Make sure you get those while the getting's good, and have a magical day, and I'll talk to you soon.